Welcome to Living Present. Today we have a special guest and a good friend, Gina Barker. Gina is a psychotherapist as well as a counselor in this Myrtle Beach area. Gina is a friend of Lisa and I. We've known each other for 12 years. She's been a great inspiration to so many people. She's not afraid to take on long marathons. I know that my wife has ran with her before, and she's other people that she's in our community with. She's helped challenge to help get out and move and maybe do I'm pretty sure a marathon or two. But again, I don't want to belabor this introduction too long, but Gina, welcome to Living Present.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So Gina, and like I said, we have a friendship and we had the opportunity to watch each other grow. You've even seen me grow, hopefully in the right direction. But I would say to watch your life unfold, it's been very inspirational to me, and I know Lisa, because at one time you've always impressed me with your ability as an educator. You're at the local university here. In some point along the path of your career, you pivoted, and it looks as though you started moving into the psychotherapy, the counseling. What was the inspiration for that?
Oh, yeah. So I came in 2011 to the Grand Strand area, and I was teaching at Coastal Carolina University for 4 years. And then that came to an end, not that I necessarily expected. And it really brought me to somewhat of a personal crisis, but it also brought me back to a dream that I've always had to be a counselor. And it sort of came over time as I was retraining myself in the psychotherapy field, and really got passionate about it. And I felt like this is really what I want to do. So I went ahead and got licensed as a licensed professional counselor and a licensed addiction counselor. And then in January 2022, I started a private practice called Turning Point Counseling and Consulting.
Well, that's great. So one of the things you said that kind of cued me in was there was a personal crisis. And in that, you made a shift. Mm-hmm. Would you say that shift, looking back on that personal crisis, would have been one of the best things that could have happened to you at that time to get you to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. It was something that I really needed, and I think I'd sort of resisted. And it was a turning point for me. So when I picked the name for my practice, I thought long and hard about it, and I wanted to be that opportunity or help people find their turning point when life is going in a direction that's not sustainable or healthy or doable, or it's contradictory to their values. Then they can hopefully can help them make a shift to be more purposeful and to have a healthier existence.
I love that, because you found life in something you were going through. So some people can get bitter, we know, and some people can get better, but you chose, just like the marathon pushing, you said, you know what, there's more. Mm-hmm. You didn't become a settler. You said, I'm going to still pioneer this. But what kind of separates people in their profession, you're not just doing talking points. You're not just mimicking something you read in a textbook. You're using your personal life as well and adopting that into your therapy, I'm assuming, because if we don't do that, then we just become kind of, I think, plastic. I feel like you have the heart because you care about people. You really want to you challenge yourself first. What good is it for you to challenge everybody else if you don't challenge yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really ask someone to go down a path that I'm not willing to go down, or to do something that I'm not willing to do. And not that I share experiences with all my clients, but I think I have a fair amount of depth just from my own journey and my own suffering. And I think it helps me relate to a lot of people and their pain and what they're going through. And I think that's important, because empathy is really what counseling is all about. And if a client doesn't feel like the counselor is understanding what they're experiencing, where they're coming from, it's just not going to be effective.
That's really good. I'm going to ask you to help me something, and maybe some of our audience here, because I know there's a lot of people who can get confused between the difference between sympathy and empathy. And how does it work when we're trying to help people? Being sympathetic, in my version, of course, would be that, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. You pat them on the back, and that's about all they get. And then empathetic is giving a little bit more to that person to help them move forward. Could you kind of help us describe, because I know some people get stuck on that.
Yeah, empathy is really understanding where a person is and letting them feel heard and seen and understood. And empathy is a skill that anybody can develop, and it doesn't necessarily require a lot of emotions. Whereas sympathy is more often or not, like you said, a feeling of guilt or pity, or even sometimes like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not you right now. And I think it comes, family members, sometimes people, are too invested, they're too close to really be able to help. And so a professional counselor, because I'm removed from my client's immediate circumstances, and I'm a safe professional space, I'm somewhat objective. I mean, I have to be. It doesn't mean that I don't engage emotionally, because I do, but I don't necessarily carry their burden or feel the pain that they feel all the time, because I would be, that wouldn't work. But I guess, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, yeah. So the empathetic side really is, but I like how you said you can be objective, right? Because you're not totally involved in this situation when they leave. Mm-hmm. You can only help them while you have them, right? And give them the best advice.
Yeah. Counseling, it's less about my magic tricks, which I don't really have that many. It's more about a relationship.
Right.
It's about providing an environment where my clients have my undivided attention and my attuned presence for an hour, and I'm completely invested in them. And some people don't have that. Some people only get that when they come to my office. They don't have that in their personal lives. And so I'm also modeling something that they can take with them and hopefully learn to have in other relationships or develop in other relationships. But it's really about a therapeutic relationship of listening, understanding, and then gently guiding my clients to meet their goals. And that's really important, because it's not about my agenda. I may see that a client really should go or needs to go in a direction, but if they're not ready to go there, that's not really my role. So I can sort of gently ask questions or make little suggestions, but I try to, be very ethical, and if they come with a certain goal, then I either agree to help them meet that, or I renegotiate where we're going, and get their consent for that, or else I really need to refer them to somebody who is willing to take them to their goal, if I'm not it.
Right. Wow. So yeah, that was a lot said in a good way there. I think often when we take counseling on to a level that maybe we haven't been trained, and I'm not saying we can't give counsel to our children, to our family, to friends. There's different levels of counsel.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Right. And so, but then there's that time when you hit that wall, when there's that person who's really had a lot of trauma, and you're like, I don't know what to do. I can't help this person. And that's when you'll say, you should, I feel like, say to them, maybe you should consider professional help, and not to degrade them, not to say it in a way that like you're crazy. Even when we were talking earlier, we talked about how you even take time to go to a counselor. It's not because of the defects in your life. It's because you want to be whole and another person to be accountable to. And also I'm sure there's a relationship and a friendship involved in that. Would you elaborate on why you take the time to even go see a counselor?
I think it's on principle, because I think if I sell a service, which, my practice is a business, if I believe in that, and I say it's good for everyone, then I need to include myself.
Right.
And I think, we all grow. I grow, I learn, and I, sometimes I feel like I'm barely a step ahead of my clients. And so I do need to process my own stuff. And so, yeah, I think that's a given. It's recommended too, but not everybody adheres to it. We get so busy sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's what I love about listening to you talk right now. You're so real. You're saying, you know what? I'm a few steps ahead of maybe just some of my clients. Because I think that's probably what's missing in some of it. If we get so clinical that we hope that they check the boxes off. but I feel like you maybe have that empathy side. You have the ability to relate with a person and then maybe ask the right questions. Maybe you can even help some people watching today with, say you have a struggle with a family member. How would you go about helping them maybe share some things to help them maybe move the ball forward where they're not going to be too invasive in kind of what you do, which I feel like is interesting. Let's think about this for a second. We really have to make the profession because the general public or the general society doesn't have maybe the ability to help someone walk through their trauma. So we have to seek professional counsel. But then if you think about it, if we could take some of what you've learned and bring that back to the other domain where you can help some people with just some tips, what would you even say? Did I clearly ask the question so that you can answer it?
Yeah, I think a couple of things you said there. What does counseling do? Like, why is it needed? I think the best analogy maybe is people go to a medical doctor because they have a medical problem, a physical problem that they need help diagnose and resolve. And much in the same way, I provide psychological wellness. I help people diagnose and assess and understand the issues in their soul, in their mind, in their emotions, in their relationships. And it's sometimes we don't have the tools. Like, Google is only good, for so much. Right. And just like, people go to WebMD and diagnose themselves, but then at some point, you need a specialist, and I'm kind of the specialist for the soul, and people, need something different. And it's also, I think, very important to realize that sometimes, not so much my clients, but people maybe who don't go to counseling, they try to solve psychological problems using spiritual means. And if it's not profoundly a spiritual problem, then spiritual solutions don't really fit. And so even though I do assess that, and spirituality is a very big part of what I do, and it's a big part of who we are as people, but it's important to know what are we dealing with. And so back to trauma, specifically, something very specific that a lot of people are experiencing, post-traumatic stress, and a lot of people don't even know that that's what it is. And if you don't know that you're having traumatic re-experiences and you try to get past it, it can be very, very difficult. So that's kind of, I guess, why I specialize in trauma, because I see that there's a real need for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually want to backtrack on something. So this really, really got my attention was being real and authentic with yourself is really important. I feel like, if not, you'll become everybody else's sounding board. You'll become a parrot almost of talking points. You really don't know who you are in a sense. And the reason I say that, you made this comment that was really good about you really may need someone's help through professional counseling, but you're over spiritualizing your walk, in which you're basically saying God's got this, but yet you're not changing. You're still living in a spot that you feel stuck. Mm-hmm. And there's this place, I guess, that you're helping people come to. I'm assuming this. Let's get down to the bedrock. Mm-hmm. Let's find out the real you in there somewhere and start living from that position, because everything in life, if we're not careful, that we attach ourselves to, we can find more meaning in that than we can find in our own self. And therefore, really kind of not move forward with our own potential.
Yeah, I think you really hit on something that's really, really key, and that's being your authentic self. Knowing your authentic self, knowing the person that God uniquely designed. I mean, that's my position, that's my faith. I don't always, make that super obvious, because a lot of my clients are not believers, and I don't make that a barrier or a condition to come and get help. But loving your authentic self and accepting your authentic self, and that can sometimes be very, very difficult, because there's a lot of, through life's experience, sometimes you end up with a lot of self-hatred, a lot of self-loathing, a lot of shame, and a lot of dissociation, where you try to get away from yourself. And that just doesn't work. You have to accept yourself and curiously get to know yourself. And from that exploration, there is potential for change. and transformation. But there's no transformation in judging and denying who you are.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So, yeah, even in my own life, looking back at how many things I've walked through in my life, how many chapters I've walked through, when I look back, of course, hindsight's 2020. And I think about, wow, in that chapter of my life, I really wasn't that grounded, but I thought I was, as I thought I was. And then these things happen, like what you were talking about when we opened up about how you had a personal crisis. It shifted, but we can take advantage of those personal crises, right? And then reevaluate. Take a minute, breathe, reevaluate, and ask yourself, why do I do what I do? And it's not about, I am not a person who encourages people to navel gaze, to keep looking at their self in a sense of selfish, but I do think self-care is extremely important. Taking time to really take a walk in the woods, take some time to reflect. One thing I have learned over the years is if you start your journey off as a person who is self-focused all the time, right? When you come to a place in life where maybe success kicks in, you don't really become less self-focused, it amplifies. Success brings amplification to some of the issues that I had in life and makes them, does this make sense? Makes them pop out. Do you deal with that? Like, we often think the person in the counseling is somewhere down here, but these are CEOs, some people, right? These are people that you would think they have everything. They have made success, but yet for some reason inside the turmoil is still there. So they may feel successful to everyone else on the outside and have an image, but on the inside, this success is not there. And so do you deal with a lot of that?
I think one of the absolute advantages of counseling is the confidentiality of it. It is a safe space for anyone, regardless of their position in society, to come and be just a regular Joe, and to unpack whatever is going on that they can't really publicize or even perhaps talk to their family about, secrets and such. So that's definitely part of it. And life transition, life stage crises is something that I come across quite often. I mean, there's some kind of given life stages, and in our area in particular, what I run into a lot of people that are transitioning from middle adulthood into retirement. And what does that mean? You left a career and then you're trying to reinvent life. You're still healthy and you probably have another 30 years, left on earth. And so what do you do with yourself? And so that's definitely, identity is, I think, a big part of what you were talking about. Like, who are you? We gain identity from our profession, our relationships, our roles that we play, father, mother, grandparents, CEO, whatnot, law enforcement officer, military. And when that shifts, that can be a very, very big loss. And so I help identify that and help find sort of the next chapter.
Yeah, so finding your identity and your function for too long does feel awkward when your function stops. Because you're like, well, who am I? And so I liked how you also said about helping people, like you deal with a lot of people transitioning into retirement. And so if I am in that spot, I'm not too far from that, I don't think, but when I say retire, that's a term I would probably have to investigate, because I don't know that I will ever retire, maybe from one particular job or focus. And then knowing me, I'm always going to be doing something. But how would you be able to help if someone was listening and they are in that spot right now? What would you tell someone that I really have had my identity in my function most of my life? I mean, some people could be in there for 60 years, 40, 50 years. How do you help them undo that and give them purpose again?
Well, it's less about undoing. It's more about moving forward.
Okay.
Sometimes you got to recognize that there's a loss. It's called role exit, that you've actually lost something that you've loved and treasured. And every loss requires some sort of grieving. And so what might feel like depression or sadness or just lack of motivation could actually be a grieving process of having lost something or given up something that was important, even if it was the right time to do it.
Right.
I don't think that your purpose ever ends. I think it can shift over time as you're getting up in years, but I don't particularly believe retirement is a thing as far as just sitting and sipping margaritas or whatever and doing nothing. I think everybody has a role to fill and some way to contribute to the community. And so I guess part of what I do is kind of help inventory. It's like, what do you, is this something you always wanted to do, that you haven't got to yet? Or, so I ask probing questions.
Yeah. So retirement would be one phase of that pivot point, but what about the trauma of a loved one? Like you've been married for 40 years and now all of a sudden the person that you've been with your whole life is no longer there. What can you give us some things on that or some tips on that as well? I don't know if tips the right word, but maybe engage with that, because that seems like to me a little bit more volatile situation, that helping someone, because I feel as though when I run into people like that, they may be stuck living in the past and they're almost afraid to move into the future because it's the unknown.
Yeah, there's regular grief and then there's traumatic grief. And regular grief, it's going to happen. It's going to feel empty, and I can help normalize that for people and help certain things that can be done, like to commemorate and to learn to live well without the person now with them, obviously, without that person, and to take time to heal, not to rush into a new relationship too quickly, because it's hard to be alone. But I try to identify if there are traumatic elements of their grief, which can be that there may have been elements of the relationship that were not healthy, and so sometimes you have to go back and repair things that have happened, and to sort of make amends, which, you can't always do it if the person is gone. But that's even with parents. Most people at some point in their life really do need to come to a point of holding their parents accountable for their parenting failures, which every parent does have. Some are very minor and some are very severe. But regardless of that, everybody at some point really do need to reckon with the kind of upbringing they had, because it's so profound. So that's a big part of counseling too, not to get complete stuck in the past. And I don't go there without the permission of the client, but I see like, we can't get to where you want to go if we don't revisit what happened in your early years. So that's kind of a classic area of counseling. Of just and a lot of what I do has to do with developmental trauma. So it's in those really severe situations where the parents were not just young and clueless, but really damaged the client, and that can leave lifelong scars. And so I help resolve that and help them understand what may have happened. And it's challenging because when you have early trauma, even sometimes birth trauma or in utero trauma, you don't really know life without trauma because you've never lived without it. So it's like helping the client discover and build something out of nothing. And that takes time, but it can be done. And that's kind of a journey I've taken myself. So I'm pretty comfortable leading a client through that, which helps. But trauma can happen at any time in life, and if you don't remember it, you may not even realize the impact.
Yeah, I think this lends itself even to the conversation that, even a counselor is not involved, but just life in itself. And you said something that kind of triggered me in a good way. Was you even talked about uterus trauma. So trauma can go back even without your memory, in a sense of, I shouldn't say memory, you would be the one qualified to tell me how far back it goes and how you actually connect with that. But I know that in life, I got to one point and go, why do I do this? This trips me up. Maybe you overtalk. Maybe you never listen. Maybe you realize it and you even recognize it, but for some reason you can't get out of this cycle. And I think maybe that's even one of the worst things, when you can see it for yourself. There's times when we have blind spots, right? And everyone else can see it. But what about us? We can see it and we're like, I don't like this about me, but I can't shake it. Does that have anything to do with some of that little things that have added up over the years that we weren't even aware of fully, or we're not even aware of it now, but maybe we're aware of it when it happened. Is that part of this build-up?
Yeah, I think usually when you have less than effective interpersonal behavior, which is kind of a big word for what you just said, like over talking or being a poor listener or whatnot, that really impacts your relationships, because people are going to avoid somebody who just doesn't care to listen, and that's hurtful, of course. So often it comes because those are reactions or ways to compensate for adverse experiences that have been had at some point in life, usually early, because that's usually our patterns are established. So I do, I can definitely help kind of decipher where did that start and where's that coming from.
So maybe you could have a parent right now that has a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. And I know for me, this is a little intimate, but I want to share it. My father and mother never were on the same page. Okay, they fought all the way to the end, but they had an adamant belief: you do not get divorced, and we're going to stay together. But everybody was miserable in our house. Right? I lived in the woods because I'd come home to fighting, and I actually remember a time where my sister, my brother, and myself, and usually I don't remember a lot about my childhood. And I think sometimes I get confused because I've watched family videos, and I think those are my memories from my dad's 8mm. But I remember there was this time, and my mom and my dad went at it, right? So my mom emptied out the china cabinet, while my brother, myself, and my sister were hiding underneath the table, the dining room table, and glass was shattering everywhere as my dad is running around the house. And I can look at it because I don't look at that now as anything. I grow from that. I don't look at it as something I'm going, woe is me. But I do know I know that had to impact me, because the reason when I look back on my life, I remember being in 4th grade and always saving the world in my head. I never was attentive in class because I was somewhere in my head having adventures. There's just like escapism to not come back to reality. Anything that looked mundane or anything that didn't look interesting, I would shut it down and I would create my alternate universe. So I say that to maybe there's a parent watching, how important it is all the way down to when they're that young, the impact we don't realize, or the trajectory, maybe I should say, that we're not realizing when we could be putting people that we love on a trajectory that's not exactly healthy. I said a mouthful, but you can speak into that.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for sharing that. That's very personal. So I think you're touching on a lot of different things that I can talk a long time about. But one of the main things that people need early in life is attachment security. We need to have unconditional love, and we need emotional safety. We need attuned parents who are able to understand what we need in the moment in order to feel safe and to feel worth and dignity. And when that's compromised, such as you have parents that are at each other's throats and not getting along, and there's a lot of yelling, and I assume from that sometimes the children's needs were neglected because they were so busy fighting their own fight. And so when a child does not have attachment security, they get insecure attachment, and there are various versions of that, but it affects their sense of self and their relationships growing up, and yeah, that's a really big deal. And so children don't understand that they have a parent issue. For them, that's their whole world. I mean, a 2-3-year-old, that's their entire security. So they often turn inward to try to figure out why am I not seen? Why are my needs not met? And so that's when shame comes in, self-blame, behaviors like, oh, maybe if I'm nicer, maybe if I'm quieter, maybe if I don't have any, what's the point in having emotions when nobody really cares? So you stop feeling, and dissociation is a hallmark of trauma. Escaping into fantasy or video games or substances. I mean, some people start using substances in their early teens because they figure it's a way to cope. So I can feel better if I drink a little bit. What else? I mean, there's so many ways that people try to, because we're all about coping and surviving.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. And of course, your parents in situations like that are not functioning. So to get back to your question, like, what do you do as a parent? you need to know that even though if your child is young, that they're going to be profoundly impacted by what you do. And if you're not well as a parent, you, I think, owe it to your children to seek counseling, couple counseling, individual counseling, to be a more attuned parent and to provide attachment security. So yeah, Mark, I think you brought up some really good points about how adverse childhood experiences and traumas, which are not always synonymous, impact people profoundly. And so a lot of what I do as a counselor is to help my clients identify those, how those experiences are still impacting them years or decades later. And it's something I'm very passionate about. It's a way to make pretty big impact in people's lives, and it's really rewarding.
Yeah, I don't want to be cliche in saying this, but it's better to probably prepare than have to repair. And I know we've heard that people have said that before, but it's probably true. Mm-hmm. You know, if I can prepare my children, if I can help set them up for life and not give them a false reality and really see what life is really like at a young age, protecting them, but incrementally allowing them to make mistakes, to be able to help them and work through their mistakes. At some point, I've got to let go. Mm-hmm. And I've got to let them become, my sons have got to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, autonomous. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be here forever, but I think that could be a whole nother segment talking about that one time, or maybe in another episode, is how do we help ourselves as parents get out of the way of our kids. But I think the content today was great. I so appreciate you sharing your heart and sharing the wisdom that you have. I'd like to thank everyone who's watching this right now. You've gotten something out of today. Looking forward to the next episode that we do. And we'll just go a little deeper. Mm-hmm. So, yes. And so just to remind ourselves, this is living present. And so the whole goal of these episodes are to bring people on that can help us live in the present moment now, not living in the past and not being afraid of the future. But how do we live our best now, actually seeing each other, being authentic with ourselves, enjoying the birds when they're chirping, when you're driving your car, enjoying yourself in the car and not wondering how many stoplights you just went through and was wondering who drove the car. So being present to me is an important part of my life, so that I can be there for people. I can be there to nurture Lisa. I can be there, my wife, my children. I can be there and help be a part of other people's lives, because I truly love trying to help people go to the next spot. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to the next one with Gina Barker. Thank you guys for watching.